Good morning, girls and boys. At the end of our lesson last week, do you remember when Jesus met two men on the road to Emmaus? They didn't recognize that it was Jesus at first, as he explained the prophecies in the Bible about how the Messiah needed to die and rise again. But then at the dinner table, they recognized that it was Jesus when he said a blessing as he broke a loaf of bread. Then all of a sudden, Jesus disappeared. Then those two men hurried all the way back to Jerusalem to tell the other disciples that they had seen Jesus alive. And while they were telling the other disciples what had happened, Jesus himself came into the room even though the doors were locked because the disciples were afraid of the religious leaders. The disciples could hardly believe their eyes. Jesus talked with them for a while and ate a piece of fish, and then he disappeared again. Now, one of the original disciples wasn't there that night, and his name was Thomas. But on a different night, Thomas was with them. And the others told Thomas, "We've seen the Lord. He's risen from the dead. He was right here in this room. He talked to us. He ate a piece of fish." "We know it's hard to believe, but Thomas, it's true. The Lord is no longer dead." As you might imagine, it's hard for anyone to believe good news like that. It sounds like a fairy tale instead of something real. And Thomas, he was skeptical. "Unless I see his hands and the marks of the nails, and place my fingers where the nails went through his hand, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." And then, 8 days later, guess what happened? Jesus appeared to the disciples again, and this time Thomas was there. And Jesus said, "Thomas, come here. Touch me and see that I really have risen from the dead. Look at the holes in my hands and my feet where the nails went through, and look at the place in my side where the soldier shoved his spear into me after I was already dead on the cross. Put away your doubts, Thomas, and believe that I really am alive." And after Thomas touched Jesus and saw the nail holes and the wound in his side, he exclaimed, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to Thomas, "You have believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet had believed." Now, many days later, 7 of Jesus' disciples went to the Sea of Galilee to go out and catch fish. Remember that several of the disciples earned a living by catching and selling fish before they became Jesus' disciples. The disciples who went out in the boat, their names were Simon Peter and Thomas. Thomas was the one that we just talked about who needed to see and touch Jesus, and Nathaniel, James, John, and 2 others. The way they caught fish back then, if you remember, was by throwing a net into the water. Then they slowly pulled the net back into the boat, and there might be some fish caught in the net, and they kept the fish. So they threw that net out and pulled it back, and they threw the net out and they pulled it back, and they did that all night long. And the nighttime is really the best time to catch fish, but they didn't catch anything at all for the whole night, not even one fish. So they were really tired and discouraged from all their hard work, and as the sun was rising, they saw a man standing on the shore. And he called out to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" And they called back, "No." So he called out again, "Throw the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they threw the net one last time. And guess what happened? That's right. This time, the net was full of fish, and it was too heavy to haul up into the boat. Then John realized who was calling out to them, and he said to Peter, "It's the Lord." And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he'd taken off his clothes to work, and he jumped into the water, and he swam to shore as fast as he could. And the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish. There we go. And when they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire with fish laid out on it and also some bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter, this is Peter, and the other disciples dragged that heavy net onto the shore and counted 153 fish. And although there were so many fish, let's not put the net on top of Jesus. Here we go. And though there were so many fish, the net wasn't torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now, none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" because they all knew it was the Lord. And Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and also some fish. Now, this was the third time that Jesus had been revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Now, children, do you remember several weeks ago in our lesson when Jesus was arrested at night and he was taken to the house of the high priest and he was questioned in the middle of the night? And while all that was going on, Peter was outside in the courtyard. Now, just before that happened, a few hours before Peter had boasted to Jesus, he was willing to follow Jesus no matter what. He'd even die for Jesus. But Jesus predicted that Peter would deny knowing him 3 times before a rooster crowed in the morning. Now, in the middle of the night again, we're in the courtyard of the high priest, and a servant girl asked if Peter was a disciple of Jesus, and Peter replied, "I am not." Then someone else recognized him and asked him the same question, and Peter said again, "I am not." And when it happened a third time, Peter denied knowing Jesus again. And just like Jesus had said, a rooster crowed right at that moment. Now that was a really bad thing that Peter did, and Peter felt awful about it. Now here we are many days later, and Peter and Jesus are together on the seashore. Jesus wanted to give Peter a second chance and teach him something important. So he had 3 questions for him. He said, "Simon, do you love me more than anyone else does?" And Peter replied, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Then Peter said, "Feed my lambs." And Jesus asked him again, "Simon, do you love me?" And Peter replied, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." Then Jesus asked him a third time, "Simon, do you love me?" Now Peter was starting to feel upset that Jesus needed to ask him the same question 3 times. So he said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." And later, when Jesus went back to heaven, Peter would be a very important leader in the church in Jerusalem. So by asking him 3 times if he loved Jesus, it would help Peter to remember the night when he denied being a follower of Jesus. He'd never do that again. Later, you'll see that Peter became very bold, even when faced by threats and persecution, because he loved Jesus with all his heart. And many years later, Peter actually did die because he would not deny that Jesus was the Son of God. Now, Girls and boys, I have a memory verse for you today. And here it is. So say that together, or say that after me, one line at a time. Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." John 20:29. Remember, this is what Jesus said to Thomas. Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." John 20:29. And now say it a third time together with me. Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." John 20:29. So let's think about this. Let's think about Thomas. Now, Thomas had heard that Jesus had risen from the dead, but he found it very hard to believe it was true. It seemed impossible. It wasn't until he saw Jesus with his own eyes, could he believe that he was alive again. Now, in the last two lines of our memory verse, Jesus said to Thomas, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Now, girls and boys, very few people have seen Jesus alive. I never have. But we have the Bible stories that were written by people who did see Jesus alive. And perhaps sometimes you feel like Thomas. It just doesn't seem real to you that Jesus is alive after he was crucified and died. It says in our verse that you are blessed if you believe, even though you haven't seen Jesus. God needs to work in your heart and bless you and give you the gift of faith in Jesus. So talk to your mom and dad about this. They've been praying for you, that you would invite Jesus into your heart. And in our children's church lesson next week, we'll learn about the last time that Jesus was seen by his disciples before he went up to heaven. So bye, and have a wonderful week.